Jabir, new podcast in collaboration with Abdullah's Artificial Intelligence Academy,
Jabir is presented
AAIA.
as a character who
Copyright
spent
Mohammed
years
Raj
rigorously
Abdullah.
analyzing history and politics and religion. And he arrives at this fundamental underlying theory.
Which is that beneath every single political system, no matter the branding or the era, there lies a core philosophy about human nature.
Yeah, he frames this by looking at a major ideological clash, right? Distilling it down to how different systems prioritize human existence.
He contrasts capitalism with what he terms socio-communism. And we should note, he isn't necessarily talking about the strict historical Soviet implementation of communism here.
Right, he's talking about a theoretical paradigm.
Exactly, a paradigm. He boils their core questions down to this really simple contrast. One ideology fundamentally asks profit first, prioritizing capital and individual accumulation.
And the other theoretically asks humanity first.
Right, prioritizing collective well-being over capital.
So how does that ideological clash actually lead into Jabir's view of the modern war machine? Because a large portion of the text focuses on what happens when a society fundamentally adopts a Darwinian worldview.
Well, Jabir argues that when a society embraces the survival of the strongest as its core operating principle, the logical conclusion is just incredibly grim.
Survival of the fittest, but taken to the absolute extreme.
Right. If existence is merely a biological or economic struggle for survival, the only rational goal is to be the apex predator. You have to be the lion.
The text uses that exact phrase, right? Dominate before you are dominated.
Yes. Dominate before you're dominated.
So what happens to a society's moral compass when being the lion becomes the ultimate goal? I mean, how does that shift things?
It entirely inverts the moral compass. In that specific Darwinian framework, power itself becomes the only recognizable virtue.
So physical or economic or military strength just becomes the new definition of morality.
Precisely. And perhaps most chillingly, Jabir points out that in this worldview, showing compassion is suddenly viewed as a dangerous weakness. Yet demonstrating restraint or seeking diplomacy is seen as sheer foolishness. I mean, think about it. If the only metric for success is survival and domination, then any hesitation to use lethal force is literally a structural failure.
Which brings us directly to the physical reality of the weapons industry. Jabir maps out this historical pivot here, noting that weapons manufacturing originally started with a very simple, universally understood justification.
Self-defense.
Right, self-defense. Nations needed walls, they needed swords, they needed strength to protect their people from the proverbial lions out there.
But over time, a profound shift occurred. War morphed from a tragic occasional necessity of defense into a permanent, highly lucrative industry.
Governments began pouring billions of dollars into it.
Billions. And the corporations running these manufacturing sectors realized something that permanently altered global geopolitics. They realized that conflict creates enormous reliable profit.
It completely shifted from a model of protection to a model of supply and demand. You know, think about the surreal reality of a modern defense expo. Have you seen footage of those?
Oh yeah, they are wild.
You have these massive convention centers where sleek corporate branding and catered lunches and champagne are literally being used to market cluster munitions and missile guidance systems.
It's treating them like any other product.
Exactly. Weapons are produced for markets.
That is exactly the absurdity Jabir highlights.
Mm.
Instruments explicitly designed to destroy human life and level cities are now traded and bought and sold like ordinary commodities.
Like wheat or copper or smartphones.
Right, they're integrated into global supply chains. The market demands growth, which inherently means the market implicitly demands conflict to consume the supply.
And we are all deeply desensitized to the language used to mask that reality. I mean, we hear the term collateral damage on the news constantly.
Constantly.
But Jabir forces the reader to stop and really look at the linguistic gymnastics of that phrase.
Because it is a deliberate sanitization. Collateral damage is an accounting term, but it's being applied to human lives.
It removes the humanity.
Completely. It removes the grief and the profound tragedy from the victims. It turns the destruction of an entire neighborhood into a mere spreadsheet error.
And the text argues that this specific use of language is the ultimate symptom of the Darwinian worldview Jabir recognized. It allows the engineers and the politicians and the shareholders to distance themselves from the blood that is actually being spilled by their commodities.
They don't have to face it.
Right. And Jabir challenges the reader to strip away that normalization The global arms trade is so often accepted by us as just an inevitable economic reality, a permanent fixture of human civilization.
But the author is asking you to look at it instead as a deliberate, systematic moral failure engineered on a global scale.
And to demonstrate that this machinery of destruction has been actively reshaping our world for generations, the text provides a historical echo. The author points to the great catastrophes of the 20th century.
Specifically World War I and World War II.
Yeah, to show the lethal endgame of this profit and domination loop. Those wars didn't just cause unimaginable loss of life, they completely collapsed ancient empires and quite literally redrew the map of the globe.
They allowed entirely new global powers to emerge from the rubble.
And Jabir zeroes in on the fall of the Ottoman Empire as his prime historical case study for this. Because here was an empire that had ruled vast, diverse regions of the Muslim world for centuries.
And then it just fragmented and collapsed.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Jabir's perspective on the fall of the Ottoman Empire revealed his view on how power actually operates. He argues that the empire didn't collapse simply because it was outgunned by external military attacks.
It wasn't just a failure of defense.
No, he believes it was hollowed out from the inside. It was weakened by internal greed, by unchecked ambition among its leaders, and by the application of a political strategy as old as the concept of empire itself.
Divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
So how exactly did that divide and conquer mechanism work in practice, according to his analysis? Was it purely economic warfare?
Actually, it was heavily psychological. The text details this really sinister, highly effective propaganda formula used to tear those regions apart. It goes like this. Lie. Repeat the lie. Then repeat it again until it becomes accepted as absolute truth.
What kind of lies are we talking about here?
Lies designed specifically to foster deep internal divisions, convincing different ethnic or political factions within the empire that their neighbors were their true enemies, or that aligning with outside colonial powers would somehow bring them wealth and independence.
Oh, wow. So they turned them against each other.
Exactly. By utilizing political manipulation and the constant rhythmic repetition of falsehoods, the social fabric of the empire was fractured before the final military blows were even struck. The population was trained to turn on itself.
And Jabir uses these historical events to make a much broader philosophical point. The fall of empires, the world wars, the shifting of borders, these were not just random political accidents or inevitable tectonic shifts in human history.
No, they were choices.
They were the direct result of moral choices. People actively chose arrogance. They chose greed, and they chose domination. The author writes that they failed the test of their earthly life.
And that historical context brings Jabir's timeline right up to the modern era. The text explicitly references the year 2021, arguing that the underlying machinery hasn't stopped at all. It is merely modernized.
Right across the world, nations are manufacturing staggering amounts of weaponry, and the justifications remain remarkably similar to those used a century ago.
Governments justify the expansion under the banner of national security, while corporations justify it as a vital economic pillar that provides jobs and technological advancement.
The propaganda playbook is literally identical. We still have a global industrial military complex, but Jabir characterizes this modern system not as a necessary shield for global stability, but as an entity driven entirely by greed, arrogance, hatred, and jealousy.
He looks at the unbroken chain of wars, the sophisticated lies, the commodification of smart bombs, and he asks the ultimate underlying question: why?
Why do we do it?
Yeah, why do human beings who possess such incredible capacity for intellect and engineering and cooperation consistently choose to construct these massive architectures of destruction?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Jabir doesn't answer that question using political science or sociology or economics. The text pivots straight into theology.
A huge shift in tone.
Yeah, it uses the Quran to explain the root cause of this global behavior. And the answer, according to Abdullah's thesis, is the staggering burden of human free will.
That is the core theological premise introduced here. The text explains that the Creator, Allah, granted absolute moral agency to the children of Adam.
Which is unique.
Completely unique. Unlike the rest of the natural world, humanity is not biologically or spiritually programmed to do good, nor are they forced toward evil. A lion operates on pure instinct. It doesn't sin when it kills.
Because it doesn't have a choice.
Right. But a human being possesses the unique ability to choose their path, which means human violence is a deliberate choice.
But with that moral agency comes a massive trap. Jabir argues this is the fundamental tragedy of the human condition. People are constantly faced with a choice between the immediate and the eternal.
And far too often they actively choose the temporary fleeting pleasures of this world over their eternal accountability.